Great. Okay, I got the timing. Okay, I got it, dude. I'm ready.
All right, so you ready?
Yep.
Here we go. On this week's episode of Friend Code, we are taking your questions about Nintendo at E3 2017. How's it going, everyone? Damiani here, and welcome to a new live episode of Friend Code. It's E3 2017, and I got an excellent panel here for you. We're going to be talking about Nintendo and answering your questions that you sent to us for $5 and above patrons. So first up joining me, Mr. Bradley Ellis.
Yoshi.
Oh, Yoshi. Yoshi.
It's a Kyle Bossman impression, too.
Popular character around here. Mr. Daniel Bloodworth.
Wario.
And a special guest, Mr. Johnny.
Waluigi.
Oh! Woo! But real quick, for people who don't maybe know who you are, would you like to share with everyone a little bit about your background? Because I just called you Johnny, and people are probably like, who's Johnny?
Sure.
Not the best intro, I'll admit. I apologize. A little tired. I was like, I thought of doing something. I was like, it's not going to work. We're just going with this.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Jonathan Metz. I'm the former director of Planet GameCube and Nintendo World Report, and now sort of retired from that after I hosted for many years a podcast called Radio Free Nintendo at that website, which is still going, and I'm still a guest on it occasionally. And I'm an old friend and colleague of Mr. Bloodworth here, so I'm happy to be here to talk about Nintendo.
It's okay, you can call him Dan.
Yeah, Dan's a good name.
Yeah.
We're going to start calling him Dan, by the way, for a little
Dan.
while. That's not going to... So, let's get into it. We got an hour for your questions. And first up, Mr. Adam Warizek asks, do you think that... So I can hear. Ultra Sun and Moon was originally supposed to be Pokemon Stars for the Switch, but was scratched for something bigger? Love and respect, Adam.
I think they were always planning to do this. It's not that different than Black and White 2, a few years ago for the DS. It's a very late generation kind of thing that they like to do. I think they're working on the Switch game and couldn't really get it ready for this year. Didn't feel like there's enough Switches out there to really merit a Pokemon release, the kind of sales that they want to do on that franchise. So makes more sense to do another 3DS game. The people who are waiting for Switch are going to keep on waiting regardless, and it's not going to change whether they buy it once it comes out.
Yeah, I do think that keeping it out on, or putting out Pokemon this year on 3DS only for the main line is smart because of how big the 3DS install base is. Yes, Switch is selling very well, but it's not near the user base of the 3DS, so they got to go where the sales are going to be for that. But it was a little bit interesting that the statement was that it might be a year or more out.
Oh,
as
really?
in it might not even be next year. So
Well, next holiday season would be more than a year.
yeah, that it falls in there technically, but I think it's more than just like, I think, yeah, they had nothing ready to show. I think that was right. It was just like, but I guess a lot of people have been asking, do you think this is like a direct response to the Pokemon Direct backlash they got supposedly about announcing that the rumor was Stars, it's going to happen finally. They didn't. People like, what's going on? Like, why can't you say one way or another if it's happening? And then they did it in the fashion they did. I mean...
Yeah, I don't think it's a response to the backlash so much as they probably knew that people would be wondering about that. And Switch being a handheld to some extent, in some ways, people are wondering when is Pokemon going to show up. So it's nice that they said that. They could probably do the Ultra games on Switch, but maybe they think it would be a distraction or it would give people the wrong idea of what's possible for Pokemon on Switch. And that probably is the future of that franchise, so they want the
that's
debut
a good point,
to
actually.
be right.
Yeah. If they just simply ported over the 3DS ones and they're like, no, we actually have something more ambitious planned for Switch. Like, we don't want to give you this as false impression. That's a pretty good point.
Yeah.
Any other input?
No.
Yeah, I don't think that. Yeah, it's weird because like I don't know how much stock to put in the whole Stars rumor. To me it just felt like one of those rumors that you could easily make up, and maybe you would be right and maybe you would be wrong. It just fit in there so well.
Yeah, it does.
I feel
more
that
like a
star's name is like complete
sun,
baloney.
moon,
It came out of
stars.
nowhere. Yeah. Thank you for that question, Adam.
Thanks,
Let's
Adam.
move on. Caleb, hey allies. In my opinion, Nintendo had a pretty decent showing in their 25-minute showcase and the Treehouse after. I'm excited for Xenoblade 2, Mario, and the 2D Metroid. But what do you think is next? Pokken Tournament DX was announced in a direct. Do you think the next DX title will be announced sometime soon? What else do you think Nintendo has in store for announcements as the year winds down? Looking forward to your answers. Love and respect, Caleb.
On the DX front, didn't we talk about this earlier? They're maybe afraid of releasing too many like ports of Wii U games. They want to space them out a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, we covered that in the
Like
post
with
show.
Smash, especially.
Yeah.
It does make. I think it does make sense to spread them out.
Yeah, I think it does
it's
too.
not. I think some people are maybe anticipating after the success of 8 that they would be more frequent, but at the same time, they have plenty of other games that are coming out. They don't need to.
I think they have a good year. So
Yeah, they don't need to actually cram too many releases in a
Yeah.
short time. I don't know if we'll hear about the next one before the year's end. Actually,
I don't think we need to.
yeah, I think they might just hold off to like winter of next year or
Yeah.
early spring for their next wave of announcements, and
Yeah.
it could be in that one. I can
Yeah.
foresee it being in that one, but I don't think we'll hear about it this year, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll still do quarterly directs, but I mean, we still don't really, we barely got any info on that second Zelda DLC.
Yeah,
And they'll probably do a whole direct just around that.
Yeah, you're right.
Pokken was a kind of a surprise to me.
Yeah.
Because I know that game has its audience. You know, some people really love it, and there's a competitive scene around it. But it's not obvious to me that game would sell a lot more on Switch than it did on Wii U. But maybe it will. I mean, because, you know, the Pokemon audience, a lot of them did buy Wii U's.
Yeah.
You know, so... But, yeah, I'm glad they're keeping that alive. It's an interesting kind of a new spin-off for the franchise. For me, the most obvious two remaining are Smash Brothers and Super Mario Maker. And
Yeah.
Mario Maker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Smash Brothers, I kind of wonder if maybe they would rather just make another Smash Brothers. You know, maybe they will, but Mario Maker seems like a slam dunk. You know, whether it's, I mean, even if they did a sequel to Super Mario Maker, it would be probably inclusive of a port of it to Switch, just with some new stuff added.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Like, I know there have been a lot of rumors about that supposed Smash port happening.
Yeah.
There's a point where people said it's definitely happening, but I could definitely see Nintendo just deciding ultimately it's like it's been our better interest to maybe just put out a new one when it comes to Smash Brothers, just because that game has such high expectations, probably of all their franchises nowadays. Like, it's like they're one of their best selling ones, and it's the one that seems to bring in the most hype and most enthusiasm around it. So I think just putting out another port, if it doesn't, and it's not called Melee HD, it's not gonna elicit that type of enthusiasm and the reaction. It'll definitely sell well, but I think they want to keep promoting newer Smash games. I think they made it that very clear when they pushed for Smash Wii U in the competitive scene. They let Melee stay around, but they're like, you need to push our newest one, though. We want to keep pushing this, and it's the one they seem to care more about. They don't seem to actively support Melee at all, but they keep supporting Smash Wii U. They're very much about the newer ones with that, so I can see that. But you're dead on, I think, with Mario Maker. I actually think that will be the next one before Smash Brothers if they're going to definitely pull the trigger on that. But yeah, thank you for that question. Let's get the next one. Dan asks, do you all think that Nintendo showed enough in their presentation to convince more people to purchase a Switch? Do their future lineup of games take good enough advantage of the portability factor of the console?
I think the question is, did they need to show anything new to convince people to buy the Switch?
Yeah, I was gonna say Switch is just doing fine
just
right
fine,
now.
yeah.
Yeah, if you look at the first 9 months of the Switches, or really 10 from March through December, you know, that we know of, the lineup is pretty crazy for
Yeah.
first party stuff. I mean, the third party is, you know, it's it's getting off to a slow start.
I mean, it's basically in indie games, and that's about it.
We were definitely hoping for more at E3. For considering the momentum that it has, you'd think more third parties would kind of be gearing up for Switch games, and a few are, but not as many as you'd like. But the first party output this year is pretty crazy with Zelda and Mario and Pokken and Fire Emblem Warriors and Splatoon and Xenoblade and ARMS and Mario Kart. It's pretty stacked, from first party standpoint. And if you're buying a Nintendo system, that's probably what you care about anyway. So I think it's doing fine.
Yeah, and we've gotten some other good things like the Disgaea port.
Oh yeah,
and then,
Shovel Knight.
I'll go into when we do our impression show later. I'll go into more detail, but I played Battle Chasers Night War today.
Oh yeah,
that's gonna be great for the Switch.
Ooh, nice.
Turn-based RPG, and it's just that's the kind of game that you want on a handheld, something that you can move your focus away from.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the second part of that, the portability, I think it should be evident to almost everybody now that there is a huge appeal in playing any type of game, whether it's specialized for portable or just a console experience on the Switch on the go.
Mm-hmm.
It is such a huge appeal just to me. You see so many people clamoring for that. They have definitely, I think to me, they have definitely made the strong case for you want to play anything on the go for this.
Even I don't like handheld gaming that much, and I love that I could take the Switch anywhere with me. They got me.
The convenience factor.
Yeah.
Even if that's not, and I agree, it's not my preferred way to play most of my Switch games, but the fact that I can, and sometimes I want to, and I do, is just a huge benefit. It makes me want to play multi-platform games on Switch versus other things because I kind of get, it's almost like a huge bonus feature that you just get automatically when it's on the Switch.
Yeah.
You can also make it a portable game. But things like Fire Emblem Warriors, I think, the Hyrule Warriors, the Zelda version of it, they released it on Wii U and then ported it to 3DS. It was a big hit on 3DS. Smash Brothers, they made it for both systems at the same time. So for Nintendo, being able to really just make one game and have it serve both markets or both styles of play, maybe even two different people, it saves them a lot of time and money, I think, and for the fans, it makes a lot of sense.
Definitely. And it is, in my opinion, it is really actually portable, unlike the Wii U's gamepad, which I can actually take the Switch anywhere I want. And I'm finding myself constantly playing at my desk, and then I just want to move somewhere else. It's just effortless. You just take it, go. We're going to come here. Oh, we have an hour to kill before shooting something. Just comes with me. It feels natural to take it. And the only thing that it is just maybe its size is a little big as a portable.
I like
but
it,
it's still fine.
Yeah,
I was concerned initially about hey, I have my phone in here already. Am I really going to carry another portable around? The answer is most of the time, yes, if you really want to, because that thing has gaming experiences on it that I'm not getting on my phone, and it is definitely worth carrying around and taking along with me. So
I do think it's kind of the right size, honestly, because if you think about
it's a good size.
Like playing Zelda, for instance, if you got that any smaller, I think it would start getting lost on the details.
And it's not that big when you take off the Joy-Cons with it. When you just take the tablet part of it, it's not that much bigger.
It's like a 7-inch tablet.
Yeah, it's not that much bigger than an iPhone 6 Plus or 7 Plus. They're the biggest model. So.
Yeah, and I think next year we'll see a lot more portable-oriented games, the kind of stuff that you're used to seeing on 3DS. But right now, Nintendo's still trying to sell 3DS for at least another year. Once that trickles down, they're probably going to shift more of those development resources towards Switch games that are a little friendlier for portable. Maybe things that leverage the touchscreen more, because you do have access to that. Or just smaller experiences. I will feel like the Switch has come full circle and is really kind of a robust library when it starts getting things like Picross and Professor Layton and, the Ace Attorney and Pokemon, the things that I associate with Nintendo's handheld systems. I feel like they're coming. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that we wouldn't see a lot of those this year.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But when that moment arrives, though, when they finally start putting everything on the Switch, it's going to be such a good time.
I'm excited for the moment when the Switch becomes just the Nintendo. It's like all their games are there. I mean, not the mobile stuff, but maybe also the mobile stuff.
Yeah, you actually,
Potentially.
Potentially could be on there, too. Thank you for that, Dan. Next question comes from Zach. Hey, allies. I noticed a bit of negative reaction to some of the non-reveals, in quotes, on the spotlights such as the Pokemon Switch and the Metroid Prime 4 announcement. I feel that these announcements were a necessary evil. Given the backlash of the Pokemon Direct, they needed to clear the air on the Switch's future with the series, the Pokemon series. On a similar point, Metroid has been anticipated for so long, I think that Nintendo acknowledging the series continuing is enough to satisfy most fans. My overall question for the panel would come down to this. Do you think that no announcement of either Pokemon or Metroid coming to the Switch would have been a smarter move for Nintendo? Should they have held off on these announcements until the games were in a presentable state, or do you think the impact of the announcements would have been the same regardless? Love and respect, Zach.
I think it would have been bad if they didn't announce that. People have been furious if there's another E3 without Metroid. At least people know it's coming now. Like, to me, that's reassuring. It's kind of like how Mike says he would just love to know that Half-Life 3 is coming or not.
Yeah.
You just know now.
Yeah. Well, I think one point too is look at the backlash that Federation Force got, regardless of how good or bad that game actually is, because it's got the Metroid name tied to it, and it doesn't really look like a Metroid game. It's clearly a spin-off. It's meant to be a spin-off.
It also doesn't play like Metroid.
Right. And so, but I think the very same thing could have happened if they led with the 3DS game. Like, if people just saw that 3DS game and they saw Mercury Steam developing it and they remembered the Mirror of Fate, and they'd just be like, this is what you're doing with Metroid? You don't care about Metroid at all, do you, Nintendo?
I don't know. I mean, I'm a huge Metroid fan. I don't claim to speak for other Metroid fans, but I was overjoyed at Samus Returns on 3DS. Honestly.
After you saw Metroid Prime 4, if you had seen that by itself, that's what I'm saying. Like, it might have...
Honestly...
I feel like it might have tainted my impression of that game a little bit.
Well, I haven't seen Metroid Prime 4 yet. I just know that it exists. I mean, I'm much more worried about that project. That's not being made by Retro Studios, apparently. We don't know who's making it. We don't know anything about it, except it's coming to Switch, and we'll find out more one day. It's great. I mean, as a Switch owner, I love knowing that that's coming, and I think it's one of those things that Nintendo does to reassure people who've just bought the system or are thinking about buying the system. It's one thing to show a lot of games coming out in the next 6 months. It's another thing to know that there's going to be really cool games you want coming the year after that and the year after that. When you have a brand new system, that's important. But that Metroid 2 remake is, number one, so needed. I mean, that game deserves and needs a remake as much as just about anything Nintendo's ever made. Zelda 2 is the only thing that I could even come close to. And Zelda 2, a lot of people like it just fine the way it is. I don't know if anybody loves Metroid 2 the way it already was. It's like, it feels like it's close, but there's like, so that game's going from black and white, on a square, tiny screen where you can barely see the enemies coming at you, to now full, a full widescreen. It's got 3D display, which is unusual at this point for their 3DS games. And it looks awesome. They're adding new powers. I'm assuming I know they're redoing some of the maps because they're adding places you can grapple to. And
maps are going to be so different.
Yeah, so I think it's wonderful. And it's the first new 2D Metroid game in 13 years. And the last one was a remake too, and it's my favorite Metroid game, Zero Mission. So I have absolutely nothing negative to say about Samus Returns. I think it's wonderful that they're doing it. It comes out in 3 months. And the only negative thing is I can't play it at E3 this year. That's all, because I just want to play it really bad. But, if they had just announced it and without showing it, especially for the amount that they did, watching it, even after 10 minutes, I was like, I don't even need to watch any more of this. Like, I get it. I'm convinced. It moves fast. It's got the action. The abilities that they're added don't look cheap or unbalanced or annoying or, it looks like they're doing everything just right. So I'm absolutely thrilled about it.
It's good to hear that, like, the positive side, like an initial positive reaction, and it just the question presented us about, like, we seemed during our reactions. I think there was some negativity, especially around Samus Returns.
Yeah.
And I will say we were not alone in some of the sentiment. I think we were more raising questions and being outright disappointed with it.
Right.
I think the only thing we might have initially been a little worried about was the visuals. But any 3DS game blown up doesn't look that good. Same thing happened with The Link Between Worlds, I remember. People thought it looked like horrible. Or not horrible. It didn't look as good. They kept making comparisons to the sprite work in A Link to the Past. And then when they finally saw it on the screen, like, oh, it actually... You need to see it on... You need to see every 3DS game on an actual 3DS screen before you judge its visual merits.
You really do, which is why Nintendo should let people play it on an actual 3DS screen at the show and then tell other people about it.
Yeah, they should have the people going around with them tethered. Like, I think Blood was saying, like, I hope they do that, but they didn't. So the point to be made is that there was a good amount of people who, one, saw the visuals initially, didn't focus on anything else, so they're like 3D models on an older system, because 3DS is now an older handheld. Two, they saw the Mercury Steam developer name.
That's what made me worry.
And they immediately thought of Mirror of Fates and just automatically assumed that they just put the same effort into Mirror of Fates into this. Without anything else, they just rushed to that judgment and said no.
Yeah.
Like, and I can also see that coming off of Federation Force, they feel burned. So there was a little bit of apathy there towards that, as wondering why Nintendo decided to go this route when they had so many other developers who would have like loved to have a crack at a 2D Metroid. Before the show, we were just naming off different studios. It would be like Yacht Club Games, Vanillaware, so many different studios.
Tom Happ from Axiom Verge. I'd love to see his take on it.
We said like Way Forward. Like there's plenty of companies out there who've shown they're capable of being masters of 2D action platformers. And it just was a little mind-boggling. I think as impressions started to come out, as more videos came out, especially the Treehouse video.
Yeah.
I think that Treehouse video afterwards of them playing through it went a long way to relieving a lot of the fears that people had.
So like that's the thing. It was like when we saw the trailer, we had concerns. As we watched them play it for 5-10 minutes, it's like, okay, this is probably at least decent. So yeah,
looked good to me when I saw it being played.
Yeah, I think Mercury Steam. Here's what I'll say: Mirror Fate's not a great game, right? But they've been through this before, so they've now that was their first 2D game, right? Since the studio was founded, I believe.
Solid Mike.
Solid Mike.
Inside joke.
But they've done this before at this point, and so it's being refined. And now they're working with Nintendo, and Nintendo has a way of working with these small studios and really kind of upping their game. And we've seen it many times over the years. So seeing Sakamoto on stage with those guys during the Treehouse Live, Sakamoto is one of the co-creators of Metroid. He was, I think, the producer of Metroid Zero Mission, the last game like this. So, yeah, I have a lot of faith in him to take care of it. And they didn't show anything that made me think it was going to be full of bad storytelling and bad voice acting. So,
no hint of that really yet.
Right. And there's even some of that in Federation Force, I think. So it really, to me, seemed like they're going back to what everybody loved about Metroid in the first place and just doing... there was no Metroid game on DS. It's hard to believe, right? No, not that hard to believe on Wii U, but...
What was Hunters on again?
Oh, yeah, there was Metroid Prime Hunters, but it wasn't a 2D Metroid.
Okay. Yeah, it's not even... That's not
Some
even really
multiplayer only,
much
though.
like Prime.
It wasn't there a pinball game,
Yeah.
too?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Metroid Prime Pinball, yeah.
I played that.
I feel like my point stands. But fair enough. No.
I get what you're saying. So there's kind of a follow-up to that. I didn't get into this because the next question kind of brings it up. So Caesar asks, the elephant in the room. So Nintendo has now announced they're doing their own Metroid 2 remake, and it's launching in 3 months. I haven't played the fan remake that was so talked about and highly praised several months back, but I can't help but wonder if this game was a response to the success of AM2R. I guess tell you that's no. They did not develop this new game that fast. I know this is highly unlikely since Samus Returns should have been in development for a while now. But here's the thing: what I've been thinking is, can Nintendo do better than a highly dedicated fan? We are in a unique position now where we can compare two modern, high-quality products. What can Nintendo do to make their game better? Also, this part's not readable. I can't understand it. That's it. That was the end.
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
Did you guys play AM2R?
So
I didn't personally. You have
I
Damiani,
played
right?
through it multiple times. The final build. Caesar usually asks pretty good questions. I'm gonna say this. I don't think this is the actual question isn't very good and very fair. Making a 2D sprite-based Super Nintendo style, like not remake, but it's a remake of an existing game, isn't the same as trying to do a remake from the ground up with completely new visuals in 3D. We still don't know what else they're doing in the game. Like, we haven't played through the whole thing, so we don't know what else is there, how much extra content is really in there. Like, we don't know the full scale of this. I don't necessarily think it's fair to compare any fan remake to a modern development process, because I don't think a single fan, I don't even think it was one fan, I'm pretty sure for AM2R.
It's a small team.
But even a small team cannot produce a AAA game or something like that. Like Nintendo, I think you'd have to try and compare it to like what Metroid Prime 4 is going to be. Like, that seems like a better, like, that's Nintendo's, the full breadth of their, resources coming to bear for a development process. But I will not beat around the bush. There's definitely going to be comparisons when the game comes out.
Yeah.
Like,
not only that, I bet you the Mercury Steam guys working on Samus Returns all played AM2R. And I bet they upped their game. I bet they not stole ideas, but I bet they played that and said, we've really got to prove ourselves at this point, because AM2R is brilliant.
Yes.
And I was amazed not just at the polish of it, but at the creativity. The maps are redesigned. There's additional powers in there from Super Metroid. It's amazing. It's one of the best fan games I've ever seen or played. So it is a different kind of production, as you say. It's a 3DS game, and with all the things that go along with that. And I feel pretty confident that they're gonna prove themselves.
Exactly. And I mean, we don't know. I think they would have said something, or maybe they'll never say if they did do it. But I mean, it would have been nice if they brought in someone from that team, the AM2R team, just to maybe to sit them down and talk, why did you decide to do this? Why did you decide to do that? I can see where there might be some legal gray area, as we said, they're probably not ripping ideas, but watching the Treehouse stuff, I thought I saw some things. I can't remember if they were originally completely just from the Game Boy version, or if they were stuff that was in AM2R. I was like, wait a second, wasn't that something they added in AM2R, like a visual thing? And I was like, is that now in there? But then again, it's can Nintendo just say no, that's how we also interpret it? It's weird, but that, I mean, I know the comparisons are coming for that, but I will say that there are a fan who has been thinking about that and nonstop working about that. Yes, they probably have a huge, keen understanding of Metroid 2 Return of Samus's design, the intricacies of it, and they probably have been thinking about crazy ideas about all the original stuff we saw in it. Yeah, that's one person only focusing on that for years. That's a little unrealistic to expect about most people. Not everyone has the time to dedicate to that. Everyone who's working on this game has to work on other projects too, so it's not their only single project. I'm sure they're going to do the best they can with it, but I feel like it's not fair to compare the two situations ever like that. I don't think it's a one-to-one analogy like that. This always comes up when fans ask questions to their favorite creators and they don't have the answer they're looking for, especially when it comes to lore related stuff. Creators don't always remember everything they wrote down about any detail at any moment on the fly, but someone who's that's their passion, they're following it, a fan, they probably do. And then they feel let down or something, and then they feel that some fans unfortunately feel like they might know better than the creators. I really dislike that mentality of anyone who thinks we know better, we could have done a better job. So I really am not looking forward to people who, when the game comes out, compares the two and says this person knew better than Nintendo. They did a better job. They should have had this person doing it because they obviously knew how to make a better game than Nintendo. I really am not looking forward to seeing those things. I'm sure they're going to happen, but
it's cool if you prefer, one or the other. But isn't it great that they both exist and you can actually play both and enjoy both and actually draw all the distinctions and say, oh, isn't it cool that the original game had this problem and this team kind of solved it this way and this team just kind of created a whole new mechanic to get around it. I was watching the Treehouse Live video of Samus Returns, and they've added like 360 aiming, which has never been in any Metroid game.
That was a big deal.
And that I mean, if you're a Metroid fan, you know, especially in 2D, that totally changes the way that game plays. And there's nothing like that in AM2R. And all the boss designs have been redesigned around that, you know. So, yeah, they're going to end up being completely different projects, and they can stand on their own.
Yeah, I think it's going to be awesome to have 2 versions, to have that case study for years to come. Like, just having that is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I'll wrap it up by saying, though, technically Nintendo shut down it, so it's still technically available and everything were vanished from the internet, but Nintendo did their best to say, yeah, that can't be distributed anymore.
They did their best to make sure it could actually come out. I've talked to people about this all the time who get cranky about Nintendo shutting that down. I mean, the truth is they have to. Once it reaches a certain level of awareness, as copyright holders, they have to shut that down, but they knew about that project for years and years and years and let them finish it and release it for days, and then they shut it down, which means that people were able to mirror it, people were able to download it and play it. They allowed that game to get out in the wild. They'll never say that, but that's really what happened. So you can't be angry at Nintendo for what they did.
Like,
we got to play that game.
They could have been way more evil about it.
Yeah. How many Chrono Trigger remakes has Square Enix shut down
Square Enix is
long
really
before they
about
ever
that.
got finished and playable?
One real quick thing. Someone actually told me, because I'm one of the people who preach that whenever someone tries to do a fan work, it is the obligation of a company to go after it because it's part of trademark protection that you have to actively enforce.
It's a legal thing,
But
unfortunately.
apparently, a lawyer posted and said it's not always the case.
There's agreements I think that they can make to allow for it, but
we're not lawyers.
Obviously, in this case, it would have been silly for them to
Yeah.
sanction that officially when they have their own remake in production that no one knows about.
Yeah, that was the thing. Like, no one knew that the remake was happening with a Nintendo, and like, as soon as they saw it happening, they're like, they knew it was happening, but as soon as they started, like, you guys need to get it out before we announce this, because we really will have to shut you. I mean, if they were ready to go with that other game, I think they would have had to have done something before it came out, but I think it might have motivated them to finish AM2R a little bit faster. Like, hey, this is like what you've got. Like, you got to do something.
I think as soon as Nintendo officially sanctions a fan game, the floodgates are open, and a lot of problems will come out of that. So don't hold your breath.
So this question, I don't want to read it yet because I have a question for all of you for clarification. Is Beyond Good and Evil 2 announced for Switch at least, or no?
I don't know that they've commented on platforms, really. I guess you'd have to go to the website where you can sign up for the Space Monkey program or whatever.
They have commented on platforms in which to say that they have not decided on platforms.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Excellent.
Got it.
The question is whether Switch is still a thing by the time that game comes out.
Sorry. So they asked Sigma. They asked about
Switch 3.
They asked about Beyond Good and Evil 2. So I think I might just pass on that one since it's not.
We don't know enough yet.
Yeah, we don't know enough yet. Sorry. Curtis asked, Nintendo did the unthinkable this year and lent their largest IP to one of the biggest Western publishers, Ubisoft. Now that we have seen the most of the biggest multi-platform games for 2017 and 2018 are going to skip. So they're saying most of the big AAA multi-platform games are just going to pass on the Switch. Should Nintendo attempt to lure more Western publishers to create exclusives for the Switch by lending out more of their IPs? If so, what IPs and what Western publishers do you believe would be the most effective for a collaboration?
Not Western, but From Software is always my answer. Always.
Always your answer?
Always my answer. Zelda, Metroid, Fire
Always gonna
Emblem,
sell the
whatever you
Metroid.
got.
I mean, they sort of have a couple of times with Star Fox.
Oh, yeah. Rare.
I mean, they still publish those
Bandai
games,
Namco.
but yeah.
I know Nintendo has done a lot of lending out their IP, but not for a game that's fully dedicated to like an equal crossover, like on the scale of Mario and Rabbids. Like just last year, we saw them lend Bowser and Donkey Kong to the latest Spyro game with the unique figures.
Skylanders, yeah.
But that wasn't. Oh, I said Spyro. Sorry, Skylanders.
Close enough.
That was not like, to me, that's not enough. Like, it needs to be on anything they do going forward to be effective has to be on the scale of Mario and Rabbids.
They did Mario and Sonic. at the Olympics.
And
Yeah.
those keep coming out, so
Yeah.
they keep selling.
I do think you'll see more of this, but yeah, is it the solution to the lack of third-party support? No, because it's going to end up. It's just like in the GameCube days. You know, they kind of sold all those partnerships back then with Sega and Namco and Konami as, you know, this is kind of how we're going to establish our third-party relations, and it produced, you know, 3 or 4 games in the course of 3 or 4 years. It's not an effective overall strategy to kind of, you know, boost your platform. So what they need to do for third-party stuff is sell a lot of Switches, number one, which they're on the track to do.
Yeah.
And they need to make sure all the multi-platform development tools work really well on Switch, so it's easy. They're making a lot of progress in that regard. It's been a long time coming, but it seems like they're getting there. And I think they need to probably work on the costs of their game production. You know?
Oh, the manufacturing.
Yeah,
Of the, like,
it
cards.
sounds like it's relatively expensive to publish games on Switch, and I think that's something that they're probably going to have to work on as well. But yeah, I mean, you solve those 3 things, and people will come, just like they did for Wii.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just had one of the ideas I always say would make sense, and then I just like went out my mind.
But one
What was
thing we
it,
do
Kingdom
see with
Hearts?
Mario,
That was another one.
Mario and Rabbids, though, is, you know, like them being very clear that you're not going to make a Mario game.
Yeah,
You know, they're not going to give their IP to somebody to make the same kind of game they would make. Mm-hmm. So it really becomes a whole, like, somebody has to pitch them on, you know, different types of ideas, I think. And however in the world this came about, it's pretty nuts. But.
yeah. Some ones, like, I think the one a lot of people would like to see, but would you trust Sega to do it, would be lending Mario to Sega to actually make a true Mario and Sonic platforming game. But no one would trust Sega with that. It'd have to be brought into Nintendo, which means Nintendo's doing more work for that. It's like, that's not solving the problem for that.
I would be interested to see Nintendo's take on Sonic, not so much the other way around.
Yeah, I'm
Just personally.
Same thing. I was like, if Nintendo was ever going to buy Sega, the first thing I want is them to try their hand at a Sonic game. Which is like to see what they could do with it. There's other IPs like they did. Sorry, I saw Ben over there and it reminded me of the Fire Emblem cross Shin Megami Tensei, the Mirage Session, Tokyo Mirage Sessions was a good one. But going with the Fire Emblem series, I would have loved to have seen with Sega again, like, I wanted to see a Fire Emblem game in the style of Valkyria Chronicles. Like, let that team make a Fire Emblem game, like real, like the still SRPG, but everything in real time when you actually take your turn. I was like, oh, if it went from Shed the Grid and went like that, I was like, oh, that got me so excited.
What about a Blizzard making a Fire Emblem game in the vein of like Warcraft 3? Where you have your hero characters who level up and
I'd play it.
Also have your
Brad's all aboard.
I'd play it. I'm down.
Yeah, Blizzard are masters at that. Like, I think that would be huge. To get Blizzard to work on anything with Nintendo's IPs
be pretty cool.
Would be huge. Pokemon? No, I'm kidding.
Ben, would you be into a Fire Emblem game like Diablo?
Potentially, yeah. Potentially.
It's on the table.
Yeah. In a weird way, I think like any other Fire Emblem spin-offs will kind of depend on my reaction to Fire Emblem Warriors because it's the most dramatic spin-off for Fire Emblem yet. Like, while there are Fire Emblem elements in Tokyo Mirage Sessions, it's not like Fire Emblem characters specifically. So, I don't know, we'll have to see.
All right. Thank you for that question. Next up is a question from Wit. Hey, allies. My question relates to third parties on Switch. So far, the major announcements for the third party on Switch are one great-looking franchise crossover, a port of the greatest RPG ever made, which came out in 2011, and a sports game missing several features that were present not only in this year's iteration, but also last year's as well. So I think we talked about this a little bit. I guess to wrap this up, do you think Nintendo is actually pushing hard enough for third-party developers to come to that platform? You talked about what they need to do earlier. Do you think they actually are doing enough to convince people? And I actually have a good talking point to go off of there. The rumor there were all those leaks that came out, and most of them came true except for regarding the Spotlight, except for something from Blizzard on Switch. And the rumor was Overwatch.
Yeah.
And then they came out, and Blizzard came out and said, it's possible. It's just going to require a lot of work, which to me was read between the lines like, hey, Nintendo, you're not coming at us hard enough here. So do you guys think they're being aggressive enough?
I don't even think it's about Nintendo coming at them hard enough necessarily. It's just, you are talking about a drastically underpowered, for lack of a better word, CPU. And when you're dealing with a lot of these, multiplayer games and all these other factors, whether you have a lot of AI running around or whether you have, particles and things to keep track of, it's just like you can't just port the game. You've got to really dig in, and kind of like Activision did with the Call of Duty series on the Wii. Like they worked on that and they perfected that. But it took time to get that figured out, and they had to completely redo all the polygon models and everything.
Do you remember what Sony did during PlayStation 1 and further in the PlayStation 2 days? They had a program, an outreach program, that was dedicated to bringing in third parties to develop for their system, and they would lend their staff and support to do whatever it took, especially during PlayStation, to get those third parties to come.
Because people were having so much trouble getting their PS2 games to run at the right frame rate.
They would
That's
right. We would do. Well, what do you need?
Or no, was that PS3? The early days of
PS3.
PS3.
They had problems.
Like EA Sports
the
games
program
and
has
things
persisted, and there were like stories from back during the PS1 and PS2 generation of like the great lengths Sony would go to work with third parties, so much as providing resources. I know the goal is to kind of take more off Nintendo's plate, but if it would bring in some of those bigger AAA games, should they maybe dedicate some of their own resources to working with those companies to make it happen? Because a lot of the times I see the answer from third-party publishers is just, we don't have the resources. It can mean all sorts of things, but if it's legitimate, it's like we don't have the manpower to dedicate. It's going to take a lot of manpower and a lot of hours to bring that to fruition.
What it means is they don't think it's worth it.
Yeah, I know.
That's what that really means.
I know that's what it means.
Right. They have the resources, but they would rather put them to something else. So they've got to think that it's worth it. And I think there's a natural lag here. It's because of the history of Nintendo platforms and third parties. And especially coming off of Wii U, a lot of people are very skeptical at first that Switch is really going to be a hit.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I understand that at this E3, 3 months after the system launch, probably a lot of the companies that you would like to see supporting Switch are, but they're just started.
Yeah.
They didn't really kick it off until right after the system launch because they wanted to see how it was going to do. They wanted to get it in their hands and try it for themselves. I think Zelda alone will convince a lot of third parties to make their games for Switch because, if it can run that Zelda game, it should probably be able to run your game. And if it can't, maybe that's your fault. I don't know. That's my opinion. But I think it will take some time for these companies to prepare their projects. And honestly, maybe porting Overwatch isn't the best use of Blizzard's time. Maybe it's including Switch in the multi-platform list for the next game that they make.
Right.
Maybe it's... So asking people to bring over I'm a little worried about Skyrim, honestly. I don't know how well that's going to sell because Skyrim's been released twice on PlayStation and Xbox. It's been on PC forever. I don't know how many people are left who would want to buy that. I'm kind of curious, but having seen that it's in VR now, I kind of feel like I would rather try to play that in VR than to play it on Switch, even though it'd be a lot less convenient. So, yeah, I think porting old games is maybe not the best approach, but hopefully in the future Switch will be alongside other versions.
Yeah, and I do think, I think the biggest gap is going to be with, the Western games and the games, basically the games that are made for PS4, etc. I think we're going to get a lot of Japanese third-party games as the 3DS winds down.
Oh, yeah.
They're just going to start moving over.
There's nowhere else for them to go, really.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to do like a Monster Hunter World and like completely overhaul the franchise and, throw all these resources and go after PlayStation and Xbox. But, even PS4 is still not that successful in Japan, relatively speaking. So,
but I mean, we see NIS there, we see Sega there,
Atlas,
Capcom is there, yeah.
Right. Capcom is sort of there for Switch, but I think they'll come along,
Yeah, especially at the non-committal to Monster Hunter in the West with the
Double Cross.
Really? Oh yeah.
Said no plans at this time. Like they reconfirmed that. Not the best. I think people maybe should hold their reservations till next E3. If we don't see a change in the messaging and what they have in the pipeline come next E3, then maybe might be the right time to start having some concerns about it. I think this is too early. I think this is too premature. I think people are just like, when things are going right, you have, what is that the term about having guilt that you're doing well or whatever. Like fans are like, Nintendo's doing well, but like something's gonna go wrong. Like any moment now, it's all gonna implode. And Nintendo's gonna be doom and gloom again. Like they're just so scared about how fragile.
If they can have 2 hit systems in a row, that might go away. But as it is, it seems it seesaws. But yeah, Dan, you probably remember back in the days in the early 2000s, we would go around and we used to have third-party appointments with almost every company at E3, and we were just running around constantly, just like you do now for all the platforms. But back then, even as a Nintendo site, we would spend hours with Activision and Ubisoft and EA, and we would go to play all their stuff, and all their games would come out on GameCube. It was a question of, does it have online or not, or are the controls weird, But at least you could count on it being available. And we just were hoping that it would be a good version. But nowadays, it's like a lot of times they don't even come out, and that's kind of become the status quo over the past decade, as a Nintendo fan. Yeah, I agree. I think next E3 will really be the test, because if Switch games are as spread out and as rare and as narrow as they are this year, then you're seeing there must be some other underlying problem with Switch. But I think if the system continues to sell well, there's going to be plenty of games started this year for it, and we'll see those next year.
All right. Thank you for that question. Next up from Kitsune. Hi, allies. I need your advice. The Switch was the very first Nintendo console I've ever owned, as I've only gotten a job recently and now able to afford consoles. However, it seems that I assumed wrongly that the 3DS would have been replaced by the Switch immediately, as there are still a lot more games coming out on the 3DS. My question is, should I also buy a 3DS now? Or is the 3DS at the end of its life cycle after this year? I feel like I'm missing out as I can't play Pokemon, Fire Emblem, or Monster Hunter anytime soon, even though I have a Switch.
I feel like you got another year at least with 3DS, with stuff still coming. I don't know about after that. But even if you buy a 3DS, there's a ton, and I mean a ton of really great games to play on that.
Yes.
If you don't have a 3DS, you're already missing out.
Yeah.
Regardless of if they never released another game on it, it'd be worth it.
So many games.
So, and Nintendo knows that, they're banking on it. That's why they're releasing new versions of the hardware still. And that may not even be the last version of 3DS that they come out with.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think there'll probably be another version of Switch next year too. But especially as 3DS, as they formally make that transition, I expect you'll probably see a more handheld-oriented version of Switch
Lite
come out next year. Yeah, Switch Lite. But yeah, I mean, 3DS it'd be a perfectly fine time to buy it. The question is whether you have the time to play the games.
Yeah.
But yeah, 3DS is a wonderful system, and depending on which I think maybe even with the new 2DS XL, you can still play DS games on it, right?
Oh, okay.
You can still pop the
that
cartridge
slot
in.
still fits.
Yeah. So if you never had a DS either, I mean, there's thousands of games available to you,
Very nice
and
backlog.
the DS library is absolutely stellar. The 3DS library is pretty damn good too. So you can't go wrong.
So there you go. Try and get one if you can. Next up, Andreas asks, "Hello, allies. I asked a similar question about Sony for the E3 love and respect, but for Nintendo it seems even more relevant because their presentation was shorter and they showed some really early announcements of games that aren't even named yet. So their question's actually not about that. The question is about, what do you think about the trend of outsourcing news outside of the conference itself? They're specifically talking about the announcements they held until Treehouse began after the spotlight. The audience, this person claims the audience is guaranteed to be lower for the Treehouse streams, So why don't you put out the delightful stuff like the 3DS Metroid or the Odyssey amiibos in the main show? You can still feature them in depth elsewhere, like the Treehouse, but those announcements, it boggles me those announcements weren't made during the spotlight. Andreas. Kind of talked a little bit about this yesterday.
We did.
Was it yesterday? But Matt Blair actually brought it up. Said that we spoke our piece about it, and I think people are conflicted on this point, whether it's the right decision to hold announcements till Treehouse or Spotlight, or the Direct or the Nintendo presentation. Basically, if they're gonna save it for that. The argument is the people want to know, and I think someone just needs to just do the research, whether or not Treehouse viewership is drastically lower than the Spotlight, or if Treehouse actually might be more watched than the Spotlight overall. Like, it's a pretty big assumption to make. I get where people are going, that the press conference slots are the biggest attention grabbers. People focus on those, and then they go off and do their own thing. They have so many different places to consume E3 that there's no guarantee they're going to stay tuned into Treehouse, especially for that long, even the first hour. So what do you all think about that? I would say it's a little bit of a gamble to put them into Treehouse. Maybe Nintendo fans are obviously going to keep watching it, but I think for the mainstream, holding those announcements till there, do you think that's a wise move? Do you think they should keep doing it? Or do you think those announcements, especially Metroid, should have been in the actual Spotlight presentation?
Maybe the reason was what you said earlier, that, people already are having trouble accepting this new Metroid game. They're worried about the developer, etc. So maybe that format where you have the developers there to talk about it, you have a longer presentation where you can really kind of sink your teeth into it and show a lot, versus 60 seconds of trailer footage in the Spotlight. Maybe they just decided that's a better way to explain it and kind of get the fan base on board with what they're doing with it. But I would bet that at least the first couple hours of Treehouse Live are almost as watched as the Spotlight, because they happen before E3 actually opens. So there's not that much competing content at 10 or 11 a.m. Pacific on the first day of E3. After that, I bet it drops off quite a bit. But
well, I think too, it could probably be argued that those first 3 or 4 hours are the most valuable out of all of that Treehouse time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was a little annoyed in a way, because we finished streaming here. I drove home, parked my car, did a couple of things on the computer, and was like, okay, I gotta go walk to the convention center. And I look over and like, they're playing Xenoblade now. I want to watch this. I have an appointment right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got to take yourself out of actually being at E3, because your experience is so different than everyone else's.
But still, though, I'm saying it's I think it's partly because they want to hook people into watching the the Treehouse stream.
Me too.
And so, like, if you have something that's really good right after the Spotlight's over, then you hook people in. Then they're not as necessarily going to just like close the browser and go away, because well now what's going to be next? So
yeah, my friends at the website are calling it shadow dropping, where they just surprise announce a game during Treehouse Live, and
we know about shadow drops.
You don't really know if it's coming or what it's going to be, and it's a weird way to do it, but I'm sure Nintendo has their reasons for doing it that way, whatever it may be. And it could be...
They sort of done it in weird ways in the past, before Treehouse. Remember, you used to always have that little round table thing. Then, was that Wednesday night that they would do that?
Smash Brothers Brawl was announced at a round table after the show closed on this, I believe it was the second day of E3 that they did that. Really, I mean, they do some weird things like that, but now with live streaming it's a little different. I bet you the Spotlight video was probably finished production weeks ago, and maybe they later decided, okay, we are going to show Metroid. We can finish it this year, so something like that. I mean, there could be timing reasons that they choose to do it this way. Who knows?
Yeah, waiting on Mercury Steam to submit that build and get it all QA'd.
Could be.
Yeah. That still blows my mind.
Yeah, because I texted you last night, and I'm like, so did you see this in Spain a couple weeks ago? Nope.
It's just like, I was here, the QA room that we ended up doing our game demo was here, and then Metroid was just over there. It was just a hallway. Just look through those doors, and I would have seen it. But no studio tour for me.
Well, thank you for that question as well. We have time for a few more. I like this one. Comes from Sven. Apparently, Super Mario Odyssey will have some kind of multiplayer. Nintendo doesn't want to talk about it. What do you guys think about that? Do you think it's going to be co-op or some mini games? So, I didn't see anything about this. So, did anyone actually see this?
I don't think they've actually shown it.
Okay, they haven't said anything though.
Not much, other than it will have it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, my friends and I have been talking about it a little bit, and we're kind of hoping maybe one person controls the cap and one person controls Mario. Almost like Double Dash, you know, you could have one person who just used the items and did the attacks, and the other person drives. And it goes back to Galaxy, the way they did co-op in that, too.
Yeah, I can't imagine, like, two separate characters running around with split screen.
Not in the main game,
Yeah,
at least.
Can't imagine that.
I mean, it makes me wonder if it's not split screen. It makes me wonder if you can both be running around a level somehow on separate switches.
3D Land or 3D World? On separate switches. Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could still be like that, but the levels really are not designed for that, the way 3D World was.
Unless there's a whole other batch of levels.
These levels are huge. Yeah. I don't think they're gonna be. They're not gonna be able to do multiplayer like they did in 3D World, like they did in this.
Well, and even if they did, I don't really know what that would add, because you're gonna probably end up going different directions and wanting to do different things. You know, so.
Yeah, it'd be more of a divide and conquer thing. And when Nintendo usually the whole thing about multiplayer, and especially Mario games, is the co-op feel of it, like the co-op nature. That just is like the opposite of co-op. That's just like two isolated experiences for people. You just get to play the game at the same time. That doesn't really make any sense, I think, with their philosophy. I think something like you said, more like controlling a hat or like star bits, something along the line of the second player experience, where they can interact with the game somehow, but player one has primary control over Mario. I think maybe just didn't want to talk about it or show it because this is the first time seeing it, and it is such a different or departure from the previous 3D Mario games, harkening back to more the 64, the Sunshine era of Mario's. And after having played it,
it really does. It feels like
yes.
Yeah,
it is. They took like 64 and Sunshine, and was just like, and then multiply that by quite a few, and you might get a sense of the size of the world. It's like Kyle and I were playing the Sand World, and Kyle's just running off in a direction. I'm like, how big is the world? How big is this world? This I'm starting to feel like we're playing Mario Breath of the Wild here instead of a Mario game at this point. Like, that's huge.
Yeah.
How far you can go on this world, like I've never seen that scale before.
Absolutely. I was heading up, you know, they did a camera pan or something and showed where my next objective was. You know, there's a moon up here on the tower. And I said, oh, okay, I'm not interested in that. I want to see what this Mario game's about. So I kind of went halfway up that path and then just turned 90 degrees and looked out into the desert and said, I'm just going to see how far this world goes. And I just ran out. There's nothing out there, right? And I just head out that direction. I run for maybe 15, 20 seconds, come over a hill. There's a whole area out there, the big poison pool and pedestals and a secret tomb that I couldn't figure out how to get into and care. I mean, yeah, it's that kind of game, right? It's not, I mean, the worlds are not going to be on the scale of Breath of the Wild, but they are way bigger than anything in Galaxy.
Oh, yeah.
And way bigger than anything in 3D World, which was almost just corridors, you know, basically. So I'm excited to just explore in a Mario game again.
For the fact of not announcing co-op, if there is, they have plenty of time to announce stuff.
Oh, yeah.
If they want to hype stuff up for the game coming closer.
Oh, yeah.
They've definitely got one direct.
They didn't need to talk about
then.
that at all to get people excited about this game for E3.
Totally agree. So they're saving that for the direct. Thank you for that question. And just read through this one again because I was glancing at it. I didn't get this far in the questions. And okay, this is just a general Metroid question. Okay, let's make sure it was another third-party question. We've kind of covered that enough. So this is from Revelo. This E3, I'm seeing history repeat itself. 2 Metroid games have been announced. One that is far off in Metroid Prime 4. The other, a remake of Metroid 2. One is a 3D game. The other is a classic 2D. So I think they're referring to Fusion and Metroid Prime.
But 2002 on the same day.
Yeah, they did. But yeah, it's one of the best days of my
so
life.
So crazy.
were they announced at the same time? I forget. That's kind of going far back. You guys
much. Know. Yeah.
I think they're talking about the announcement.
Well, I don't think they really were.
A little differently, because Metroid Fusion was first shown as Metroid 4 at E3 2001.
Yeah.
Jeez.
The crazy teaser.
It wasn't playable, but yeah, there was a teaser video, which is, if you're a Metroid fan, definitely worth looking up. Very weird.
It's not easy to find either, that video.
There weren't a lot of videos back in 2001. It might be on our old Planet GameCube VHS video from 2001.
VHS?
Which, you know what?
That's where I saw it.
We have uploaded that stuff to YouTube. Okay. So if I can find it, I'll let you guys know.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Disseminate that. But yeah, those were pretty much shown in their final state for the first time at E3 2002.
So awesome. their actual question is, being as critical as you can. I'm not reading they give scores to the games, but being as critical as you can, what innovations do you want to see based on any critiques from the first 3 Prime games? So what do you want to see in innovations in Prime 4? And lastly, why does everyone hate on Other M so much? I, for one, had a blast playing that game. The combat was really fun and energetic. Huber, those kills, man, were epic. Sure, the story was melodramatic, but then again, most games are. So what is it about Metroid Other M that makes people get so upset? So what innovations do you want to see in Metroid Prime 4 based on everything you've seen in the original trilogy? Why are people so upset about Other M?
I'd like to see Prime 4 play faster. Because the 2D Metroid games are pretty fast.
Yeah.
You know, they're action games. And the Prime series is a little more plotting, and, you know, you're meant to kind of look around the room.
Yeah, it's a lot slower pace.
It's almost more like VR games now, you know, where you're in a big room and you're meant to look around and see the detail and look for, you know, little things and figure it out. I would like to see Prime 4 be a little bit faster paced, feel not like a first-person shooter, but more like a modern first-person game. You know, versus the originals. But other than that, new powers would be nice.
Yeah.
I hate when Metroid just rehashes all the old powers.
And then that gets us to Other M, because I think for what they were going for in terms of the 3D movement in kind of a 2D space, you know, that mixture, like I think that they really got that right.
They had some good ideas in Other M.
Yeah, but at the same time, they didn't introduce any really new powers. We got to see the speed booster in 3D finally, which was great.
It was cool. Yeah.
But yeah, and then as far as why people don't like it, it'd be really interesting to see if you could cut the story out of that game and get people's reactions to it, because I think it could be different. But at the same time, people don't like to point the remote at anything, and when it isn't perfect every single time, then that just, you know, annoys the heck out of people.
Also, I mean, I can make Other M a better game in one step, which is add nunchuck support.
Yeah.
Just being able to play with an analog joystick and be able to keep that pointer pointed at the TV so that when you go into your missile mode, you're ready and you don't have to do the whole switcheroo thing and wait for it to figure out what you're doing and transition over. That would be a huge upgrade right there. And then, better writing, better voice acting, you know, the weird point and click first person scanning environments, that stuff is really terrible. I mean, Other M has a lot of problems. Doesn't make it a bad game. It's probably one of the worst Metroid games, you know, but that doesn't make it a bad game.
My personal problem, I mean, yes, I don't need to go into the story stuff. Everyone knows about the story stuff with Other M, whether you like it or not. My problem was just the amount of how linear of a game it was compared to almost every other Metroid I had ever played.
There's a few secrets, but there's not a great sense of exploration.
I did like most of the way that the combat situations played out. It's just I wanted an extra layer of Metroid in the sense of backtracking, having to find alternative paths, you know, more secrets than what was in there. that was like what I was looking for, and it just didn't give me enough of that. It gave me enough of this new combat style, but did not give me enough of the other thing, which is what Samus Returns seems to be kind of doing that, like with the whole parry or counter mechanic. It's more fast paced, a little bit more action heavy, but it's definitely gonna have those secrets and the backtracking, having to figure out where to go more.
They put that mini map on the bottom screen, and they're gonna use it.
Oh yeah. But yeah, that was my problem with in terms of like other stuff. I don't know so much as I want to see the evolution of from 1, 2, and 3. As I hope they feel that whoever ends up developing this, the team they put this out. I know Kensuke Tanabe is putting together the team internally, but whatever the final team looks like, I really hope they don't feel they have to be strictly held to those first 3 games standards. Mm-hmm. That just because it's called Prime, it's tentative working title, as you pointed out the other day, Blood. Even though it's probably going to be Prime something, it does not need to be exactly like the other games, even in style. They should not feel like they have to. I know there's going to be certain expectations with that, so I don't think you go too drastic away, but I would like to see them do something as bold as they did with Breath of the Wild, as they did for Zelda. Mm-hmm. I think this needs to be that title from Metroid. This needs to be Metroid's title to do the crazy stuff they wanted to do, that they think will work, but take what has worked in the past and incorporate that as well, and just give us this wow factor of a game in terms of, wow, I cannot believe they did this. I hate to be like cheesy with this, but as soon as I played Breath of the Wild and finished it, I was like, you know what? I just want Metroid where
underground.
It's
underground
Breath of the Wild. Like, just give me the catacombs, the caves, and all the layers and stuff underground, and go deep down. And that's Metroid, next Metroid game right there. Yeah. Get a competent developer on it, and there you go. Something simple as that. But if it's still gonna be first person and in that perspective and everything, still gonna use the cannon and the visors and all that, so be it. Like, that's great if it's a Prime style game, but trying to do that, yes, that's enough for me. I just want to see them try and mess with some of the conventions, because there haven't been as many Metroid games as there have been Zelda. Mm-hmm. And they seem to all, so there's a lot more similarities between them. Prime was the first one to kind of shake that. That was such a big deal when that game was coming out, the development, how fans freaked out about that. Yeah. Same situation. It's been forever since, console Metroid games. Like, where is it? Miss N64. Oh, hi, Metroid Prime. Oh, it's first person. People were rioting. It was like almost as bad as the Wind Waker reveal. It was just like not quite as bad, but it was like approaching that level. People were like, what are you doing, Nintendo? This is not Metroid. And Retro showed everyone. They're like, no, look at this. Actually play the damn game. It's really good. Yeah. Like, this is one of the best games ever made, and probably one of the best games on the system here. So I know some people might be upset that Retro's not attached to this, because people have that faith in them. Like, they did it once, they can do it again. But who don't know? They still haven't fully assembled the team. There could
Retro
be
is a very different studio than it was.
And that was what I get to.
2007. That was 10 years ago since they made a Metroid game. A lot of those people, the key people, have left.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
So just my thing is the sky should be the limit for this game. Mm-hmm. Don't just try and make the direct sequel to Metroid Prime 3.
I agree, but they did call it 4, which sets up certain expectations that they must want us to think about.
Could be just the story continuity.
I honestly think that really the only reason it's called a Prime anything is to communicate, outside of the fact sheet, that it's the first person adventure game that's going to have a high production value, and that may be the only real similarity. They said that it's going to be essentially creating a new storyline. Mm-hmm. It's going to somehow encompass the other Prime games. And what was weird though is they almost treated the Prime games as being now separate from the other Metroid.
Well, I mean, they always were in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, they were.
It's
that was their
little subplot.
That was the Phase-On trilogy, and it kind of concluded all the Phase-On drama, with Dark Samus. So we always knew if they made another one, it would have to go in a pretty different direction.
Yeah.
We didn't know it would take a decade, but but I'm so excited. It's hard for me to believe anybody could be, really upset about Metroid Prime 4 being announced, because I wasn't sure they were ever going to make it.
Right.
Or make anything like it, really. There's no guarantee we were ever going to get another Metroid game, and they announced 2 on the same day. So, regardless of whatever else happened at E3, I was going to be pretty happy about this week, and I am.
So, time for one last question. Kyle was like, one more. For the record, it is 9:27 at our time right now. We started at 8:28. So, we were hitting the 1 hour mark right now, so this will be the last question. And I read for the next few, and I like this one from Jamie. Hey lads, what do you think Retro is working on if they're not working on Metroid Prime 4? This is a good question because where is Retro? It's been a while. What are they working on?
They've been hiring a lot over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and they've been hiring.
So they're in full production on something. And I really thought we would hear about it at E3. And I think we could maybe still hear about it by the end of the year. Nintendo often will announce a big game in December for the next year. But it's hard to say. You know, I mean, their track record is they revive old Nintendo franchises. They've done it with Metroid. They've done it with Donkey Kong Country. You have to think there's a strong likelihood they're going to do it again with another. And so among Nintendo's franchises, there's only a few that are so dormant that they might get the Retro Studios treatment. I think F-Zero is a decent possibility. They've been helping out with Mario Kart 7 and 8. So they've kind of been getting those chops under their belt. Maybe something like that.
That would be great.
I'm hoping for a new IP. I'd personally love something brand new by them.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. I think it's
Just let them do whatever they want.
about
I think
that
they've
time.
earned it.
Yeah.
I think Nintendo now with Splatoon and ARMS has shown that they're warming up to new IP.
Yeah.
I think that there's a good case that could happen. And as you said, like, it was another era, but while Metroid Prime was in production, Retro had a whole slew of other games that were, concepted and prototyped, and and those were just all trashed, so everyone could make Metroid what it was.
Back in the Spangenberg hot tub days.
Yeah.
Fun times.
Inside stories.
Yeah, I was like, I don't get it.
Inside stories.
Oh, those were outside stories.
Those are they spent a
lot.
lot of Nintendo's money on things that they should not have spent it on.
Yeah.
I'm kind of the same. I agree with you, Brad, and a little bit with you, Blood, about I think Retro has earned the right to do what they want to do. Like, they get that chance to deliver a game, whether it's a new IP or they should even have their chance to pick. If they want to do a remake, they should be able to pick or reinvent a series. They should have their pick of the litter, basically. But I would be most satisfied in seeing a new IP from them because it just strengthens Nintendo so much more by adding another IP. Because you said ARMS, Splatoon, like it was a few generations ago, it was Animal Crossing, Nintendogs, these series that just keep coming out every generation. Like, they need those. Can't always be Pokemon, Mario, Donkey Kong, and Zelda. And some of the ones are like getting old, like Star Fox after Zero. It's like, I don't see them coming back to that anytime soon. Like, they need fresh new IPs that are in their own, and I think Retro's the one to do it. So, and I do agree. I think we could see it maybe this year. Just because it wasn't E3 doesn't mean they have a special direct that has some updates, and then, hey, surprise, this new game, and it says Retro at the end. You're like, oh my God, there it was. So, I believe. I believe in that.
I believe.
Thank you all for all those questions. Sorry if we didn't get to the rest of your questions. There were a lot submitted. And sorry for those I skipped over. A lot of people asked about this thing. A lot of questions about third parties. A lot of questions about Metroid. Hopefully you got everything you wanted to hear from us out of that. But thank you very much for watching. And thank you again for joining us, Jonathan. For
My
this.
pleasure.
It was absolute blast.
Insightful.
Yeah, very insightful hearing about that stuff. And thank you again, Mr. Bloodworth.
Yeah.
And always a pleasure, Mr. Ellis.
Yeah.
Good stuff. And with that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Friend Code.